Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch, listen to this podcast. We are finally here. It is a game day week for college football. I won't just say football because we have been watching football all spring and summer, UFL, IFL, the Arena League, you name it. We have all watched it, but Jackson and I are back for the first hardware podcast of the season with our week zero preview. And thankfully, it's a light slate, a little bit of a nice slate to help us ease into our routine again. But man, I'm just so excited to get back to it. Jackson, how's everything going?
Thrilled to be back. Thrilled for college football to be here. As much as I love watching third stringers play preseason football, as we wind down training camp in the NFL. I'm ready for some real action that actually counts. And college football gives us our first taste of that. So I'm thrilled. It's going to be fun. College game day in Ireland. We finally get it. We can put an end to revenge travel. I feel like this was the last trip for anyone that was yet to be made, right? Because they had planned that in 2020. So that'll be a lot of fun. Some great games this weekend. And I had told you over the phone, right? It's not the strongest slate. It's not a full slate, but hey, you know what? It is a slate, and it's football, and there's multiple games, and it'll still require multiple screens. So I'm thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got a good enough slate to tie us over. It's a Saturday. It's not much to do, especially for disenfranchised American young men and women. So we are here. I mean, it's just great. I mean, I'm so excited. I don't know where to start. So I don't know, Jackson, if you want to hop into the slate and look at well, I guess for those of you that are new this season, because we have gained some momentum over the off season, this is the Harvard podcast. We do talk about the award races. So we're going to tie in award races with every single game this weekend, even the FCS games, which is a throwback to our 2021 spring season. So great with that little, I guess that little aside, that little context. I'm settled down. So Jackson, do you want to go in terms of order of the games or in terms of the most important games of the weekend?
We can do most important. That's fine by me. I don't remember. I think I had done in order of the actual kickoff times.
Then we can
So
do that. That's fine
yeah,
too.
we can do that. I just went off the score app. Highly recommend it. If you don't have it downloaded, way better for scores than the ESPN app. So a little free advertising for them, I guess. But yeah, I'll start with in order. First game is going to be FSU Georgia Tech, at least on the FBS side. I believe there's not FCS doesn't kick off until 3:30, right? With McNeese and
Yes.
Tarleton.
Yes, McNeese
Okay.
Tarleton is the first game.
Okay, so you got no choice after college game day but to watch FSU Georgia Tech. FSU being a 13-point favorite. Georgia Tech last year 0-4 versus ranked teams, 6-3 versus unranked. They kind of played perfectly as expected, almost, right? Where you split your unranked and you lose all the ranked games. It doesn't bode well for them, or that stat doesn't bode well for them going into this. But last year, on the bright side, though, for Georgia Tech, it was their first winning season and bowl game season since 2018, essentially. Brent Key, who's the head coach there, he went to a bowl game all 4 years and beat Georgia three times when he played guard at Georgia Tech. I should have let off. He went to Georgia Tech. He's schooling is coaching at his alma mater. So I think that's important in my opinion, at least, just because you want to, well, you have a tie to the university you're at, right? And there's an innate expectation for what the standard of play should be that's high, right? When you go to a bowl game every year that you were at Georgia Tech and you beat Georgia three times, it really, you can speak to success that you've had at that school. I think that's important personally. Um, if you hire someone that went to the school that is they're going to be coaching at. So, but his expectations can sincerely be higher than they have been for Georgia Tech in previous years because of his history there. So, as far as on the offensive side of the ball for Georgia Tech, they led the ACC last year in rushing and sacks allowed. Jamal Haynes was the lead, led the charge in the backfield. He had 1,000-yard season, another 20 catches. Just kind of watching him a little bit. Vision is his best characteristic. He's not an overly physical back, but he has enough wiggle to make guys miss. He can be on kick return duty as well, and that's where his vision is probably the most evident. You always love seeing guys that have special teams and returning experience play running back because really it's not going to be a problem for them to make those micro decisions, every play. So on the defensive side of the ball for Georgia Tech, uh two players the two players who had 17 of 21 sacks last year transferred, right? So there's going to have to be a lot of young talent that steps up. The strength of the defense is going to be the safeties, really Clayton Powley and Lamiles Brooks. They're going to be lacking the sack production that they had last year, but if they can have some other players step up. So, and then Florida State, I don't have to tell you, unless you lived under a rock, they lost like double-digit players to the NFL draft. They're actually the only team to have multiple defensive linemen, defensive backs, and wide receivers drafted. The edge, Marvin Jones Jr., a transfer from Georgia, is going to come in and probably pick up where Jared Verse left off. That's going to be probably the most experience they have on the defensive line, but they're gonna be hurting, replacing a lot of pieces, obviously. So, as far as any sort of prediction goes, I'm sure we'll hear a ton talked about it in pregame and all that, but Georgia Tech's really only going to have a shot, in my opinion, if they can keep the run game strong, control the clock. The offensive line is the strength of this Georgia Tech team. I don't know if it's enough to keep Marvin Jones Jr. in this Florida State defensive line away from the quarterback, but we'll see, and that's going to be the only way it can remain competitive.
Yeah, so Jackson, first off, I gotta address this. You said Georgia Tech went 0-3 last year against ranked teams. How could you forget the Miami game? The miracle in Miami, the Miami Miracle
Oh
with
wait,
the with
did I
you
put
said
was Miami ranked
0-3.
then?
You said
Did I?
0-4 or 0-3 or
I
0-4.
did say 0-4. Did I mess that up? I
And
apologize
they
if
beat
I
North
did.
Carolina too. They beat a ranked North Carolina. So I just wanted to address that, especially the Miami game. You one of the biggest Miami haters there is.
Man,
Uh,
I need to fire our researcher, Omar, which is me, oddly enough. So yeah.
so
um they beat UNC. I didn't see UNC being ranked. And
well, I'm
then
looking at my Phil Steele. This looks like they're ranked in the AP. I think Phil Steele goes by the AP poll.
oh, you know what? I just went off of Google scores, which show Miami and
Oh, you
UNC
can't do that,
being
Jackson.
unranked. So yeah, yeah.
Can't do
I,
that.
well, I will be paying attention all night to see if I had any other ranked versus unranked statistics. Hopefully not. I can't remember, but
It's okay. It's okay. We're working out the kinks here with week 0 in the small slate. But yeah, I mean, this is a great game, honestly. As a Service Academy fan, I think the Ireland game should be Notre Dame Navy, right? Almost all the time, should be a Service Academy playing in Ireland. It's great. It's great diplomacy and everything. Or a Northeastern school. Send Boston College or UMass to Ireland, right? So this game's random, right? It's a random. Next year's game is even more random. We got Farmageddon in Ireland, Kansas State versus Iowa State. With this one, though, I wanted to ask, of course, us being an award show, we're already going to fire up the Heisman bandwagons. So, do you think either quarterback's case? We got Haynes King, who had 700 rush yards, 100. He gained 100. He gained 838 yards before sacks last year, and of course they were sacked. Or I guess I'm looking at the sacks they allowed. 15 sacks last year, so give or take about 100 yards, right? So he had 737 net yards, right, rushing. Haynes King, exciting player, right? Anytime you see a player with a 27-16 touchdown interception ratio, you know that it's made for TV, right? Of course, DJ Uyonglele needs no introduction. So either quarterback has a big game. Does it help their Heisman case? Florida State, of course, is a national contender. They look primed to be the favorite out of the ACC for the playoff, but Georgia Tech, I'm not so sure if they have much playoff prospects, especially with the non-conference schedule. So your thoughts on both quarterbacks Heisman prospects after this Ireland game?
well, I think if one school does have a Heisman candidate, it's unfortunately I hate to say it's probably going to be FSU on that side. I don't think so. We talk a lot about how the Heisman is voted upon and how the voters, I guess, analyze prospects, and it's not. I wouldn't say the correct way for what the award should be. And I'm not making. I don't want to make a knock on them and make a statement on Georgia Tech's quarterback or anything like that. But no, I'm gonna lean towards no. But it's very early on, and I'm probably wrong. So
All right, fair enough. I mean, I think Georgia Tech is a very trendy pick for at least making the ACC title game, in my opinion. At least out of the conference, right? If they upset Florida State, then that is definitely great momentum. Louisville looks like a much more winnable game this year with the pieces that they lost, especially in the run game and Jack Plummer. So I will say Georgia Tech. I'm not saying they're going to win the ACC. They're not going to go to the ACC title game, but I think if they pick up some momentum and make the ACC title game, like Kenny Pickett, 2021, made it to New York for the Heisman ceremony on a I think two-loss Pittsburgh team that lost to Western Michigan, but still found their way to the ACC title game. So that's just my thoughts, I guess.
uh,
Just providing some context.
my concern is that I feel like in every Heisman race we forget what happens before like really mid-October. The mid-October is kind of that line of demarcation where if you do anything after that, then it's going to be remembered, and if you do anything before that, then it's usually forgotten about, or even if forgotten's the wrong word, usually something more significant happens in the meantime, just because the way college football is built, right? It gets more climatic as the season goes along. We'll see if that changes with the 12-team playoff as opposed to a four. But that's my opinion, at least. That even if they do something in this game, right? It's going to be this is not going to be the game that we are talking about when the Heisman's being decided, in my opinion.
I don't know, and I beg to differ, right? Because it's in Ireland. You have all the pomp and circumstance, right, and everything. For Georgia Tech, Florida State, fresh off the controversy of last year, right? So I think there's definitely a lot more storylines than we think. This isn't just like a Notre Dame Navy game where it feels like a formality. I'm not insulting, our dear arch rivals at the Naval Academy. I have a lot of respect for them, as those who follow this channel and follow my writing, but it's not really a formality. I mean, this is Power Five or Power Four football, right? But when you say they forget about what happens in early October, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Like with Kenny Pickett, that was a good thing because they did lose to Western Michigan. They did lose to the Quick Lane Bowl champions, Western Michigan, that year in 2021. So I'll leave you with that. Going on to the next game, FCS. We have an FCS game that was moved up late in May, and it's great. I think more FCS schools should take advantage of that and say, you know what, we'll move our game up ahead a week, and we will play on week 0. We'll play on national TV with limited competition. I think the FCS kickoff last year got over 200,000 viewers. 200 to 300,000 viewers, which is just great, respectable viewership. And of course, we'll get into the MEAC SWAC kickoff, which is now a week 0 staple. But we have McNeese State at Tarleton State. And this one's a fascinating game because of the quarterbacks, right? So I'm going to showcase the quarterbacks, and things are going to be a bit reversed. I mean, I'm going to showcase quarterbacks. Jackson's going to showcase a running back for one of the schools. But this is arguably next to Haynes King versus DJ Uiagalelei, probably the best quarterback matchup of the entire week because you have Victor Gabales, who is a Walter Payton Award dark horse. Tarleton State, mark my words when I say this, I as FCS fan slash voter or poll voter, I think Tarleton State will have a rise similar to Kennesaw State. And I'm not just saying that because Kennesaw State moved up to FBS recently. Like Tarleton State, they've been in plenty of Conference USA rumors. They have a great alumni base. They have plenty of wealthy donors. Well, maybe not wealthy, but they have plenty of locked in donors. They have a great student base. They have a big stadium and everything. So I can see them ultimately ending up in Conference USA as they want to. And that was shown last year where the dreaded playoff eligibility rules reared its ugly head last year, where Tarleton State went 8-3, but yet they were ineligible for an FCS playoff bid. That changes this year. The Texans can make the playoff, and they will be led by a 1-2 punch. I'll talk about the quarterback, Victor Gabales, last year, 2,492 yards and 18 touchdowns. He's a transfer from Washington State. There are plenty of 2021 Sun Bowl connections in this podcast, as you'll see later on, as we'll see later on. But he's Washington State transfer, just a gunslinger recruited in Nick Rolovich's offense to play for Nick Rolovich. So definitely a guy to watch. And of course, the Walter Payton Award is a quarterback award. The last non-quarterback to win it was Cooper Kupp back in, I forget the year, but I think it's like the mid 2010s. And the last running back to win it was 2000, I think all the way back in 2003 was the last running back to win it. So it is a quarterback's award. Going on to McNeese State, arguably one of the storylines of the offseason was where will Clifton McDowell go? Clifton McDowell chose shockingly to go to McNeese State in the Southland. And McDowell was electric last year for a great Montana State team. 13 touchdowns, 4 picks, 2,026 yards, and 753 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. So this is going to be an amazing, matchup. We got Cowboys versus Texans, and the Cowboys are the guys from Louisiana in this game. Jackson, I guess anything to say about the quarterbacks before we head on to your guy to watch for this one?
I don't really have anything to add on the quarterbacks, but I do want to spend some time bragging on Kayvon Britton, the running back from Tarleton State. So 2023 was his first year at Tarleton State. He transferred from Arkansas Pine Bluff. Dude, he had 1,150 yards and 16 touchdowns, averaging 105 yards a game, another 11 receptions and 106 yards in the air. He has fantastic vision, great elusiveness. He's got to be one of the most exciting FCS backs to watch. It's really not top end speed or strength. It's just consistently him making the right reads post snap that makes him great. There wasn't really one highlight reel that I found that was, kind of showcased all of it, but if you're on X or Twitter, just search Kayvon Britton and you'll see a bunch of highlights, mostly from Tarleton State football posting. And man, he is so fun to watch. It's just play after play of him being exciting. So shout out to Kayvon Britton, and hopefully he gets showcased not just beyond his pro day and all that. Hopefully he gets some invites to some of the All-Star games after this season. But fun player to watch.
I totally agree. And my thing with Kayvon Britton, you know that I'm a running back purist, I'm a running back appreciator. And I just wish that he had more of a workload last year. He had 183 carries for 1,150 yards. I'm doing the math on the yards per carry right now. That's 6 yards per carry, incredibly efficient. He had a touchdown almost once every 11 carries. Once every 11 carries, he had a touchdown with 16 rushing touchdowns. And I'm surprised you didn't bring this up, Jackson, because this is your thing. If you can't catch, you can't play. Only 11 catches, 106 yards with a 5'7", 185 frame. You want to see, of course, the casual NFL fan like me will mention Darren Sproles, right, as a comparison. But I mean, I know you would probably like to see him catch more passes, but I do think with this efficiency, which I think the efficiency will go down with more carries with his frame. I think with more carries, I definitely think we're looking at a Walter Payton Award dark horse, someone that could end up in the top 5 of the voting. Someone that comes to mind, a similar Walter Payton race that comes to mind is that of Quay Holmes a few years ago, where Quay Holmes did everything for that East Tennessee team. And I'm surprised Quay Holmes isn't really playing professionally, I guess, in either the UFL or CFL, because that was a man that did everything, a very multifaceted back. So I'm excited for that game. I think I got Tarleton State. Honestly, they have a great team. I know I ranked them pretty highly in my poll. I think top 15, definitely top 20, very high on them. But if they're not careful against McNeese State, a new look McNeese State squad with Clifton McDowell, an electric quarterback, like they could find themselves upset in this one. But unless you have anything else to say about this game, Jackson, would you like to move on to our next one?
There we go. Had trouble unmuting myself for a second. I do want to point out quickly, just looking at his game log from 2023, he didn't hit multiple touchdowns until late October, against Moorhead. And it's actually really interesting. He didn't get he didn't get at least 20 carries until the week after that. So last 3 weeks of the season, he had 20, 22, 20, and 22 carries for a combined 7 touchdowns, which is very impressive. It's kind of interesting to see. It looks like almost reminds me of Ollie Gordon last year, where it took them a few weeks to figure out, like, hey, maybe we should like give this guy the ball more. Because I think Ollie Gordon, if I remember right, he had like very few carries through like the first 4 weeks of the season, and then it just skyrocketed after that. And this is more of a gradual progression. He went as low as 9 carries in the loss at in Lubbock, but no, it'll be interesting to see if off the bat if they're going to end up giving him if he gets 20 carries in this first game. I think it's going to say a lot about how they're planning to use him for the year, considering they didn't, like I said, they didn't have him do that until the weekend before Halloween. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, like this Charlton State team with Cabela's playing great at the quarterback position. I'd say everything's open for I guess Kayvon Braden will have plenty of opportunities to shine and be incredibly efficient and score touchdowns. So staying with the FBS kind of slash F staying with FCS kind of, and also going to the FBS, we have arguably probably the most fascinating game this weekend in my opinion from a betting perspective, because you have Montana State visiting New Mexico at University Stadium. And that game is fascinating because Montana State, perennial powerhouse, they've been a semifinalist the past couple of years, I believe. And they have just been amazing. And they're a 10.5 point favorite on the New Mexico Lobos, Bronco Mendenhall year one. So yeah,
and I want to point out, Omar, real quick, you called them a powerhouse. You mentioned multiple being a multiple score favorite. They didn't have a single win last year in the regular season that wasn't by multiple scores. That's insane. Usually you have at
it
least one
is.
close call. And I know, yes, of course, they did lose some games too. But most of those games were very close, went into overtime, something like that. And every time they won big. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So with this game, I know Jackson, you had there's obviously probably one of the biggest stars, one of the early favorites for the Walter Payton Award playing this game for Montana State. So I'll let you talk about him before I take who to watch for New Mexico.
yeah, for Montana State, Tommy or touchdown Tommy Mella, the quarterback from Montana State. He was a 2022 finalist, so name should sound familiar. He has 25 career rushing touchdowns, and even if his passing to statistics aren't the most impressive necessarily, he can run the ball and he can run. It's a lot of off schedule plays. It's not like, design quarterback runs necessarily, but it's those when the play breaks down, he knows how to escape the pocket and he has enough of an arm too where, it's not going to be the default, but it's definitely something that you have to dedicate a spy at least or play zone to where, everyone's facing the quarterback at least to stop him. So an interesting thing about this particular matchup, New Mexico last year had the 106th ranked rushing defense. So it's absolutely an advantage to Montana State as far as that matchup of a running quarterback versus a very lowly ranked rushing defense. So it'll be interesting to see when Montana State is on offense how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, for New Mexico, I have a couple names. First, I want to shout out Luke Wysong, fellow Cleveland High School grad from Rio Rancho, making noise. I think he was on the Paul Horning Award watch list as well. He was injured last year, was redshirted, is back this year. So just want to shout out Luke Wysong, who had 8 starts in 2022. But I also want to shout out to I think there's a couple ways you can go with New Mexico, right? So this team only returns 3 starters. Last year, the running back play was outstanding. You have Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt transferring in from itty bitty Itabena, Mississippi, and with Mississippi Valley State. And last year he had 17 touchdowns, had 1,190 yards on his way to becoming actually an honorable mention All America. And the way he performed in the last 2 weeks of the year against Fresno State and Utah State with back-to-back 200-yard games, he was amazing. Like he was amazing, and he literally, I don't think anyone thought he was going to cross the 1,000-yard mark after 10 games, but he sure did. So, of course, Merritt transferred to Arizona, who was a sleeper team for the playoff this year. This year, they got Eli Sanders. They got Eli Sanders from Iowa State. And Iowa State, we know that Iowa State produces great running backs of late, especially Brees Hall is the one that comes to mind. So that's one way I want to go. I also want to talk about the quarterback room that they have. So Devin Dampier showed flashes last year as the more mobile quarterback, along with Dylan Hopkins, the UAB transfer. So Dampier had 6 touchdowns, no interceptions last year, was smart with the football, also added a spark in the run game with 5.6 yards per carry. But I want to ask you, Jackson, just a little bit of trivia. So Jason Beck was the offensive coordinator for Virginia from 2016 to 2021. Can you name I guess some of the quarterbacks that he coached?
At Virginia?
Yeah, Virginia. There's two in particular I'm looking for. Maybe three actually. We'll go three.
And what were the years again?
2016 through 2021.
2016 through 2021. I can't. No, no, I'm not gonna waste any more time. I'm just sitting here in silence.
Dang.
No, no, who were they?
I think you can get one, but okay. I thought you could get one, especially since you're a UFL guy. So Bryce Perkins, he was under Jason Beck's tutelage, who is now the OC at New Mexico. You have Brennan Armstrong in 2021, which was
Brennan
Beck's
Armstrong.
last year.
Yeah, yeah.
He had 4,400 yards in 2021, I think. And of course, he had that significant decline after Beck left. And then, of course, you have everyone's favorite streamer, Kurt Benkert, everyone's favorite NFL player turned streamer, Kurt Benkert.
Who doesn't love Kurt Benkert?
So that's three great quarterbacks. Beck is offensive coordinator, so I think he can do some great things with Dampier this year. But I have to say, I don't think that Montana State will win by a couple scores. I do think it's going to be a closer game than people think. I would honestly take, I would honestly take New Mexico's, especially at home. In the heat in New Mexico, I think it'll probably be high 80s, low 90s. I can't imagine it gets that hot right now in Montana. So I think those are things to look out for. But I do think Montana State pulls off the upset. But I would take, I'm not a better, right? I'm not, this isn't FanDuel or anything, but just from my thought and everything, I would take New Mexico covering in a loss. But I mean, it's a fascinating game for sure. It absolutely is.
So I just looked up his profile on Virginia's the Virginia sports website for Jason Beck. Another player he coached I did not realize, Taysom Hill, when he was at BYU. Um Another name to add to his resume. So one more thing on this game while we're on the topic of FCS versus FBS. I want to get your opinion on between the three FCS FBS games that we have for week 0/week 1. This one, North Dakota State, Colorado, and South Dakota State, OK State. Which one is the best gauge of where the two divisions really rank up to each other?
I would think so. I would have to say South Dakota State, Oklahoma State,
Really?
because I think because with North Dakota State, you can chalk it up to just their unique offense, really. More like I guess more so. I'm not saying they're a gimmick or anything, but the way that they play physical, the way that they shorten games, they really, I mean, they play different. Like they're not your average FBS or FCS team. South Dakota State plays a more, I guess, sort of closer to the mean style of football, right? And Mark Gronowski is a more dynamic player. Of course, I'm not going to say you can find Mark Gronowski at many schools in the FCS, but they run a spread. They have great talent, and I think more so that the talent shines. Excuse me, the talent shines at least from the skill positions at South Dakota State than it does at North Dakota State. And excuse me, I think that's a bigger measuring stick, especially too if you look at the star power of Oklahoma State and the resume that they had last year. Ollie Gordon, of course, is the big one. And they went to the Big 12 title game last year. So I think that's the bigger measuring stick because, I mean, Montana State, New Mexico isn't that great of a school football wise. I mean, and then, of course, you have North Dakota State or Colorado, where, I mean, not only do you have the scheme, but Colorado is coming off a 4-8 season. A lot of people are still wondering like what to really expect from Coach Prime's constant roster turnover. So that's just my thoughts. I don't know what your thoughts are, Jackson.
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna go with this game. Montana State, New Mexico is being the best gauge of where the FCS ranks up, only because it is a consistently good FCS team versus a consistently bad FBS team. I think for North Dakota State, Colorado, I North Dakota State, we know who they are. It's a known quantity. Colorado, I have no idea how they're gonna do. Dude, like they could win 4 games, they could win 8. I wouldn't be surprised at either. It's just too inconsistent. And then for South Dakota State, obviously very good team. And Oklahoma State, dude, I can't get over that. What was it, 31-3 loss to South Alabama last year, right? Where like we've seen them lose to. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
South Alabama bad, but like you shouldn't get beat by South Alabama by that much if you have one of the best running backs in college football in Ollie Gordon. So that's what I'm gonna say. As far as where I can the result of this game, well, this is the only game that will probably affect like my confidence in the FCS, depending on the result, right? So,
Yeah.
because the other two you can shrug off on just being a bad game for what might end up being a good team for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like that point. I really do like that point, honestly. And I did overlook the volatility of Oklahoma State, which that South Alabama game, they weren't bad. This was a but they were still a 6-6
Yeah.
Fun Belt team. Not exactly a James Madison or, any of the prime contenders in the Sun Belt.
This,
Troy even.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
So I guess going on to our next game, I guess that's a good segue for our next game on the schedule. Got to pull up the TV calendar again, just get the order. So we got North Alabama versus Southeast Missouri in the FCS Kickoff Classic. And I'll be honest, I'm going to speak to this as a college football fan, as an FCS fan. I love the Crampton Bowl. I love the history of the Crampton Bowl. You'd be hard pressed to find someone that loves the Crampton Bowl and the Blue Gray Classic more than I do. I own a blue gray classic snapback. I own a collectible truck, 16 wheeler for the blue gray classic. But the Crampton Bowl, it's not a great host for the FCS Kickoff Classic. It needs to go back to campus sites like how it was in its first years and allow it to be a truly watermark event for the FCS. We're not getting prime matches. We're not getting the Missouri Valley Conference teams. We're not getting the Big Sky teams to play in this game because this game is confined to the Southeast because this game's being played in the Crampton Bowl. So this year we got North Alabama, a team that didn't finish 500. Southeast Missouri didn't finish 500 either, and in one of the weaker conferences in the FCS, the Big South OVC. But this game will still be great. This game will still be competitive. It's a great showcase for the FCS in general. But if you want to get even more eyes on the FCS, you're going to want those Big Sky schools. You're going to want like 2015 Montana versus North Dakota State, where Stitt happened and Bob Stitt and his Montana Grizzlies beat North Dakota State. That being said, I'm not going to rag on these two teams. In fact, North Alabama is probably fresh on the minds or I guess fresh on the national conscious after their appearance on the CW last year against Florida State, where they got over 1 million viewers on network TV. Not going to mention the very tragic and gruesome injury that happened that game. I'm not going to go beyond that. Of course, I just mentioned it, but I'm not going to go beyond that. But they made a good account for themselves in that game against Florida State, uh, leading 14-0 and really, making Florida State wake up. I mean, of course, I don't think people thought that North Alabama was going to beat Florida State, but having a 14-0 lead over a team that should have been in the top four and was an Orange Bowl participant, I mean, that's great kudos to North Alabama. So I guess I want to showcase. Of course, we mentioned the Walter Payton Award being a quarterback award. We got Noah Walters for North Alabama, pretty dynamic quarterback, dynamic playmaker for the Lions. He had 2,345 yards and 21 touchdowns through the air, and not accounting for sacks, he had 87 carries for 495 yards, over a 5 yard average, close to 6 yards, and two rushing touchdowns. He's a very dynamic quarterback, but in the air, he will be challenged by Southeast Missouri State's Ty Leonard and Joe Edric Lewis. My handwriting's so bad on my notes, but Joe Edric Lewis, who combined for 21 pass breakups between the two, with Lewis intercepting 3 passes. Last year, of course, Southeast Missouri, I know you're a Senior Bowl guy. Southeast Missouri State sent Ryan Flournoy to Mobile to play in the Senior Bowl. Not sure if you remember him, if he was much of a player during the practices, because I was in the field during the Senior Bowl. But I mean, they very well could send a player in back-to-back years to Mobile with these two defensive backs. They are just outstanding prospects, and they're gonna clog the passing lanes for Walters.
And you're forgetting one of the best defensive players too for Southeastern Missouri in Bryce Norman, the inside linebacker. He's coming back for another year. He had 66 tackles as a true freshman, right? I'm not sure how many he had last year, but he's coming in back for a hopefully a third season of proven production. So Bryce Norman, another guy to make a lot of moves in the run game. And then on offense, I can't tell you too much about Southeastern Missouri's offense, but I do know they do have 7 returning starters. I think just in college football and in the area of the transfer portal, I think but just having a lot of returning starters and retaining talent is going to be an advantage that was kind of a given for most schools, right? That's just kind of your plan for as a program, but now that's not the norm, right? It's not the norm to bring back a lot of guys. So to bring back, 7 out of 11 starters on offense is something to be said. So you can have, I'm not sure if they have the same offensive coordinator or play caller as last year, but there's some that, like I said, they're retaining a lot of talent and hopefully can make the most of that chemistry that they've already developed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this game will go it'll go either way, honestly. I really do. And I think that's great for the FCS because this game will be in prime time. I believe I keep switching off between my notes and the TV schedule. But I think it's on prime time on ESPN. Yeah, 7 o'clock ESPN at the historic Crampton Bowl. Just a great stadium to go to. And it should be a bucket list venue for everyone. Just a piece of college football history, for sure. But I mean, that one looks even. I'm excited for it. But also, running concurrently and probably the game of the night uh in the primetime slate, you got the MEAC SWAC Challenge, which has firmly cemented, excuse me, itself as a week 0 staple. In 2021, you had a fantastic, the first year when the game moved to week 0, you had a fantastic quarterback matchup. You had Felix Harper facing off against Davis Richard, which at the time we knew Felix Harper was the go-to guy in that matchup. But Davius Richard, with the season he had last year, with the invite to the Hula Bowl out of North Carolina Central, now he's going to be playing in the UFL next year. I am so excited. I think he's going to be the next PJ Walker in the UFL. I love everything about his style of play. He's electric. But this year we got Florida A&M versus Norfolk State, and this is going to be weird for longtime HBCU followers. Saying if you told someone in let's see what year, if you told someone in 2018 that this is going to be the MEAC SWAC Challenge, someone would call you an idiot. A MEAC fan would call you an idiot, or a SWAC fan would call you an idiot. But these schools are in different conferences now because of conference realignment. And even though the MEAC has been decimated by losses, they still hold the edge in a lot of head-to-head matchups against the SWAC. I'm not sure the count for sure, but in terms of celebration bowls, last year's win against Florida A&M was the first celebration bowl won by a SWAC school since the excessive celebration bowl in 2016. So it's a party anytime these schools come together. You got them playing at Georgia State Stadium, Center Park Stadium, for the formerly Turner Field. You got Jay Walker, you got Tiffany Green on the call. I mean, it's just a fun time, dude. They're just a fun crew on Thursday nights in the MEAC. This time they're on ABC before national audience. But I want to showcase for Florida A&M a well-traveled journeyman at quarterback in Daniel Richardson. This man has been so well-traveled. Remember that Sun Bowl connection I was talking about? Well, he was the quarterback opposite Victor Gabales in the Sun Bowl. So who knew that we would have a full circle 2021 Sun Bowl connection? But Richardson has had a really nice career, and I'm not sure if I mean, you can probably speak more about this, Jackson being more of an NFL guy, more of a draft process guy. But I'm not sure if the stigma exists between shorter quarterbacks because Richardson is 5'10, 205, but he has carved a great career at Central Michigan, Florida Atlantic, and now Florida A&M, where, I mean, he has 56 career touchdowns. He has 56 career touchdowns, 23 picks in 2021 for Central Michigan. With handing off the ball to Lou Nichols, that play action was working. He had 24 touchdowns and 6 picks. And he's not as mobile. He's a classic pocket passer. So you got a 5'10 pocket passer, Jackson, in Daniel Richardson. Do you think that, I mean, is a stigma behind short quarterbacks dead, really, especially a pocket passer like Richardson? But I will say he is a quarterback to watch, and Florida A&M's not going to skip a beat after losing Jeremy Musa, the HBCU Player of the Year. Or sorry, runner up.
He went to Central Michigan, right? So
Yes.
he probably had, I mean, the great Central Michigan assistant Connor Stallions on the sideline helping him a lot too. So
He just had to. He had the
yeah,
greatest
I had
the second greatest Florida coach of all time coaching him though.
to. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I had to with the Connor Stallion documentary circling or looming. Anyways, I would say the guy who probably broke the stigma a little bit was I'm gonna say like Kyler Murray, because obviously there were a lot of Kyler Murray jokes about how short he was and all that, and he's played. I mean, he hasn't been like a an all pro quarterback at Arizona, but he's been able. It's warranted a lot of respect that a lot of people didn't think he would get, right? So I'd say, recency bias plays a huge part in the NFL. It's always, what have you done for me lately? And I'd say he broke that. If anyone's bringing it back, I'm a little worried about Bryce Young. Bryce Young, I think what's going on in Carolina is not his fault. But now you're kind of seeing that come back, at least in casual NFL circles, as far as what the stigma is with short quarterbacks. I'm sure if you ask NFL executives and scouts, they'd have a very different answer. But I'm speaking for the people, Omar. What they think, we kind of forgot about it with Murray, and now you see some things with Bryce Young, but that's again not his fault. They were picking first overall for a reason, so or should have been.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will say, like, I have always loved short quarterbacks. I've always thought that that was just a myth, honestly. So I think Richardson will do well on really, and I saw that the thing is, it's like it's not exactly height that makes bat downs more common. It's staring down receivers, which I was listening to a video about whether Baker Mayfield was good or
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
and I heard that. So that's something I learned really, but that should be a good game. Speaking of another Richardson, Norfolk State's got AJ Richardson on defense. Was a freshman All-American last year. Excuse me. He had 11 tackles for loss this year, so he will definitely be trying to wrangle in Daniel Richardson and have that pocket collapse on him. But I think Florida A&M is too much for Norfolk State, especially with Norfolk State having to start their starting court their backup quarterback with Otto Coons sitting out. And get this, don't be confused. Not Jaden Daniels, not Jalen with an O, but Jalen with an E. Jalen Daniels will be starting at quarterback for Norfolk State on ABC in front of a national television audience. This is Norfolk State's first ABC appearance since 1979 when they played Virginia Union in front of a regional audience, while the rest of the country got Notre Dame versus USC, which I'll be writing an article about later this week. It's really quite the story. But just a little tidbit there if you take anything from this podcast. So, Jackson, do you have anyone from Florida A&M or Norfolk State?
I don't. I was just gonna talk about. Well, you were talking about famous quarterback for a little bit. I watched some of his highlights against Illinois, which was a lot of fun to watch. But you have a lot more to add to me, so I'll default to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all I had. You got the defending Black College Football champions playing this game. Really not much else to say. Should be a great showcase. But I think the SWAC continues to gain their momentum against the MEAC, which would make for 3 straight wins in either the Celebration Bowl or the MEAC SWAC Challenge for the SWAC. So they're gaining a bit of ground. So there's 2 more games in the slate. I'll let Jackson take the lead on SMU at Nevada, and then I will talk more about Delaware State, Hawaii, which personally I'm probably just as excited about for as I am for the MEAC SWAC Challenge.
Oh, I would agree. That's gonna be a really fun game. But SMU at Nevada will start off with. I think it's safe to say this is our first ever Power Four versus Group of Five game, right? Now that we're dropping, we're officially calling it Power Four, right? As a family. Okay, cool.
I think so. Yeah.
So as far as SMU goes, as far as spreading the ball around for SMU, they had 8 players last year with over 300 receiving yards in 2023, which is insane depth for SMU. They're going to be led by slot receiver Jacob Bailey, who's actually going into his 6th year of college football. Average depth of target for SMU last year was 11 yards, so and typically most efficient in the middle of the field. So look for SMU to try and get a lot of matchups on linebackers and get slightly behind them. So from Nevada, don't expect too much from Nevada this year in 2024. In my opinion, this is going to be a multi-year rebuild. This is going to be year 1 of that, obviously. You can't put all the blame for what's going on in Nevada on recently discharged Ken Wilson, as he inherited a difficult situation from Jay Norvell's departure. I'll briefly go off on a rant about that. I realized Norvell had like back-to-back bowl games before leaving. He took 11 Wolfpack players with him to Colorado State. Even more players transferred as per usual when a head coach leaves. So that's a whole another mess, and hopefully I'm not ruffling too many feathers. But Jeff Choate, new head coach and former co-defensive coordinator, inside linebacker coach at Texas. He's a more defensive coach, so the majority of responsibility for that offense is going to lay on Matt Lubick. This is not his first time being an offensive coordinator. He has been an OC at Nebraska, at Washington, at Oregon. He's seen a lot of success, particularly when he was at Oregon. Before that, he actually worked as the wide receiver coach at Duke, where David Cutcliffe called him simply the best recruiter I've ever worked with. So something to be excited about. Like I said, I wouldn't expect too much this year, but you have the pieces in place. You're gonna get there, Nevada fans. I promise.
Yeah, so I mean, shoot, I'm gonna go on a little rant as well off Jay Norvell. I'm not trying to hate on Jay Norvell, but everyone knows about the Braden Fowler Nicolosi controversy, where apparently he was, drawn, or school tried to get him for $600,000. When it's like, okay, yeah, I get you want to be, the good guy, but Jay, you did the same thing to Nevada. You did the same thing to Nevada for free.
You
So it's
can't be
like
saying this, Jay Norvell.
yeah, like out of all the people saying it, it's like, come on, man. And it's like even last year with the Colorado State game, which like, hey, the Colorado State Colorado game, like I'm not calling him a dirty coach, but it's like, like it wasn't the best look. So I mean, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna say I'm not a Jay Norvell fan. He had some great work at Nevada, and everything, some electric offenses. But that being said, so of course, like you say, it's a multi-year rebuild, but I'm here to stick up for Nevada. Nevada's got a great running back in Pat Garwell. I mean, remember the 2022 or is 2021? Yeah, remember the 2021 Boston College Eagles? Pat Garwell ran for 1,000 yards. Phil Dracovic. That's when I was still riding the Phil Dracovic Heisman / first round draft pick train. Those were great times, right? Garwell is starting running back for Nevada. This year, Brennan Lewis returns, a former Colorado starter who almost beat Texas A&M when they were ranked in 2021. I'm just trying to find good things. Those guys can run the ball. Lewis had 495 rush yards last year. I want to ask this though, Jackson, as we talk about this SMU Nevada. Preston Stone, great year as a freshman, 28 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions, 3,197 yards through the air. SMU's in the power conference now. They got games against TCU on the CW. That's a network TV game. They got Florida State, and I mean, really, Florida State's probably the biggest game of the schedule. But do you see Preston Stone making a splash in the Heisman race with this Week 0 game if he performs well against TCU on the CW, or in a couple in a couple more games on the CW for SMU? And if SMU finds a way to upset Florida State, do you see Preston Stone finding his way into New York?
If they find a way to upset FSU, and FSU has a good season like they had last year, then yeah, I can see. I don't think it's the most unrealistic thing. I think it is going to take, just to the very casual fan that is not listening to our podcast, that maybe catches one or two games a week. It's going to take a minute for, I know SMU is in a power conference, but it's going to take a minute for those fans to recognize that these schools are now in their the ACC, right? It's gonna take a little while for conference realignment to kick into the public, so to speak, or in the subconscious of the public. So I don't know. I don't want to say that off the bat first year SMU can have a guy go easily, just because they're not even getting money from the ACC, right? Like they're a member, but like it's gonna take a while for them to be respected as such. So I'm not gonna say off the bat, but eventually, like in 2030, which is somehow only 6 years away, yeah, absolutely. I think SMU can they have just as much of a chance to send someone as an ACC school that is, not a Clemson or a Florida State.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that for sure momentum, right? I mean, I don't think they're going to take the ACC by storm. I don't think they'll beat Florida State. Will they be blown out? I don't think it'll be much of a blowout either, because Florida State was kind of bipolar last year with the Boston College game, where Boston College almost lost to Matt Sluka and Holy Cross 1 week, and the next week they're almost beating Florida State at home like crazy. But I just think that's a testament how volatile the SEC is or ACC is. I think they'll make a bowl this year. But I mean, I just want to raise that proposition.
You
Going on to
wanna talk about volatility in the ACC? I'm gonna miss now that there's no, and I know they did away with this earlier, that now that there's no divisions. Remember when Clemson went to the ACC championship like 7 years in a row? And
yeah,
those 7 years, it was a different ACC opponent from the other division every single year. I'm gonna
yeah,
miss those days when it was, yeah, yeah.
no, those are interesting days for sure. So going on to the last game of the nightcap, of course, the game that everyone's talking about, the game that I may have gotten into a Twitter skirmish with a few people about, regarding Delaware State and at Hawaii on the SpectrumSports.net. And this game has already gotten crazy without a down being played on the field, given Delaware State's troubles with transportation, which this just shows how underfunded a lot of HBCUs are. And if you have the chance to support your HBCUs, whether it's going to a game or tuning in on TV, so that TV money flows, I say do it for situations like this. But already a crazy situation. I mean, this game, in my opinion, this is my other lock for the weekend. I have Delaware State covering a 38.5 point spread. If not, I will formally apologize on the next episode. But I mean, I'm excited about Delaware State to really get a moment in the spotlight on this in this game, and namely Marquis Adams. I mean, Delaware State struggled on offense last year, but Adams was running for his life. I think Delaware State he took like 19 sacks for over 100 yards, if not more. You take away those sacks. Oh yeah, it's 19 sacks for 95 yards. I have the math on my little note sheet here. But he had 373 non-sack rush yards, 62 carries, over 5 yards, actually over 6 yards a carry, I think. Really elusive in open space and everything. And he has a chance to make a few plays against a Hawaii rush defense that allowed 171 rush yards per game and 4.6 yards per carry. The other quarterback, though, and this is just going to be honestly, you want to talk about in August, you want to talk about August cinematics. Like, yes, there's Deadpool and Wolverine, but how about Marquis Adams and Braden Schager? Talk about some late night fireworks. Braden Schager last year, he had those Timmy Chang numbers with Timmy Chang as his coach, of course, with 3,542 yards, 26 touchdowns, and also 14 picks because you got to make it exciting, right? So, I mean, I'm just excited for this one because Braden Shager's entering his senior year, got plenty of experience, introduced himself to the national stage by upsetting Jake Hayner and Fresno State back in 2021. And I want to raise a proposition for you, Jackson, right? So say Braden Shager in this run and shoot scheme throws for 400 yards in a late night thrashing of Delaware State, even though I want Delaware State to cover. Say he does that. And the next week on CBS with our friend of the podcast, Rich Waltz, calling on prime time against UCLA, finds a way to upset the Bruins, throwing for 300 to 400 yards. Is Braden Schager a Heisman dark horse out of Hawaii after week one, with Hawaii buzzing with a 2-0 record? And if they beat UCLA, they look like they can start 4-0 with Sam Houston and Northern Iowa.
I think maybe when you get back from your mini honeymoon and we're talking about Heisman candidates, if that happens, then maybe we give a little note at the end, right? When we're talking about our Heisman race. Legitimate Heisman contender? No, I'm sorry. I can't get behind that as a realistic possibility. But I love the idea of talking about Hawaii football. I love the idea of success at Hawaii football. I just want to get them on a watchable channel as well, or an accessible channel, I should say. So
You
I know
got this. You got your
CBS would,
phone.
yeah, with oh yeah, it's impossible to to find some of these sometimes, but I would love that. I just don't think I don't think that's going to be a realistic hype.
So I think the scenario would be more realistic. I think if Oregon had not canceled the game against weeks on week 0, which I'm not just saying this from perspective as of someone who of course roots for Hawaii casually, right? Everyone wants to see Hawaii do well, but also I feel bad for Dylan Gabriel because this was his homecoming to the island, but Oregon canceled it, and I'm not gonna blame Oregon, to be honest with you. I'm not gonna blame the Power Four school, like it sucks. that the Power Four like they stood their nose up, but like part of the contract said that Oregon was going to get 5,000 or so tickets. Clarence TC Ching Stadium holds 16,909 seats. So already that is a bunch of ticket revenue that's lost from Hawaii as a home team. They just got to get they got to get the stadium situation figured out. We need the new Aloha Stadium built soon. But honestly, the Braden Schager Heisman hype, September Heisman hype would have been great if he would have gone throw for throw with Dylan Gabriel. Like I think a game that kind of comes to mind for me is like 2010 with a sophomore year Matt Barkley and Bryant Moniz in Hawaii went throw for throw with Matt Barkley and USC. I think Hawaii lost that game 49-36, but that kind of carried that Bryant Moniz Heisman momentum to the next year in 2011 when people were talking about Bryant Moniz. Like people love Moniz and people love to hype him up. But I just want to bring up that scenario. That game is on the Team One Sports app on the mainland. And for our friends that may watch in Hawaii on the islands, you got to pay the pay-per-view. I mean, that's just how it is. But with that, that is a whole week zero slate. I'm very excited for this. So many great games. It's a small but a delicious slate of games. So Jackson, do you have anything final to add before we sign off?
I don't think so, man. I can't wait. The only position group that I realized I forgot to mention that I wanted to was the Montana State defensive line. Brody Grabe is kind of leads that charge. He's a 250-pound defensive lineman that vertical jumps 40 inches. That's not normal. And he also has one of his line mates, Alec Eckert. He transferred from Wazoo. He said in the interview, I thought it was really interesting. He said that he wished he had started out at Montana State. He was like, I wish I had been here from the start because I'm just kind of joining this team and along for the ride. I forget what his exact quote was, but I've never heard anyone say that they essentially are saying they made the wrong choice. They wish they had been at their new school from the beginning. So I think it speaks a lot to the chemistry that Montana State is. I'm looking forward to seeing that particular group. But other than that, dude, can't wait for football to be back. I apologize. I'm shaking off the rust. I was not as active as Omar during the off season. So, but we'll get better. We'll and have a lot of football to enjoy, and it's gonna be fun when we can not just preview games. We'll talk about actual stuff that happened. Imagine that. So,
Yeah, imagine that indeed. But until next time, everyone, thank you for joining. Thanks for listening or watching. And peace, love, and soul, the Bird Popper.